Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of our Budget Builds Monthly series. Now it's February, you know what that means? It's time for a new budget build. Let's get into it. So before we get too far into the video, just want to outline what Budget Builds Monthly is. In case you've seen this before or you're new to the channel, welcome. Let's check out what Budget Builds Monthly is all about. Posting the first Monday of every month, I review your budget request submitted via the Google form down in the description below. Using this information and PCPartPicker, I try to build the best bang for the buck PC within your budget, considering any constraints or platform preferences you may have. We usually make 4 builds, 2 AMD and 2 Intel, using either DDR4 or DDR5. We also check for deals on Micro Center and Newegg to see if we can modify the build to create a better PC within your budget. If possible, we also take a look at the used marketplace too. Next, we compare each build using online benchmarks and list out the pros and cons of the top options. This helps us figure out which build is best for you. And don't forget, we can't do any of this without your input. Speaking of the input, let's see how we fill out the Budget Builds request form. Now, a quick disclaimer to go with this: budget builds will be as close or slightly over the budget due to parts and availability, as well as sales going on at the recorded time. In case you forgot or you're new to the channel, this is how we fill out the Budget Builds request form. For your privacy, we do not collect your Google information. Just don't worry about that, you actually don't have to sign in. Budget builds do not include taxes, fees, or Windows keys unless specifically asked otherwise. Budgets will be in USD. Now, form factor preference, this will determine case size, as in this is the motherboard size we're going to pick. If you want a mini ITX motherboard, we will go with a mini ITX case, unless you want us to get a micro ATX motherboard and then a specific case size, just put here in other. For CPU and GPU preferences, if you want us to build an Intel only system or an AMD only system, and same thing for their graphics cards. If you have any other preferences or requests when it comes to CPU or GPU, like an Intel GPU, just put it here in the other category. Areas of focus just covers the hierarchical standpoint of how we're going to build out the system and spread that budget. If you want us to focus first on your CPU, then your motherboard, maybe your graphics card, we're just going to put the budget more focused towards those. Focus first, and then focus last. We'll just grab some generic and placeholder items for you, the user, to actually pick out later on. For already purchased or own system components, if you already have a power supply or a case or anything like storage, just put it here. Just specify specifically what you have, just so we can work that into the build and we don't have to worry about putting money towards something in that budget that you already have. No sense in buying 2 PC cases if you can just use the one you already have. For peripherals, if you are requesting any, like a mouse, a keyboard, a monitor, a headset, just press on the peripheral and then the other just request what kind. For example, if you want a 1440p monitor, just hit monitor and then press 1440p in here. And then other request, no RGB or anything else you want us to know, just press in the other and then hit submit. And that pretty much concludes filling out the Google form. If you have any questions, let me know down in the comment section below. Alright, with all of that out of the way, let's check out what kind of system we're building out in this month's episode. For the month of February, we have a user budget of $600 USD, wants a combination working gaming system, no form factor preference, wants us to focus on a AMD CPU and GPU, so we'll limit ourselves to AM4, AM5, maybe go into the used category, see what we can get with that. Focus first on a motherboard and case, that's a first, then our CPU, then our graphics card, followed by cooling, memory, power supply, and storage. So we'll probably just use any inbuilt cooler that we can find with our CPU, but we're not going to limit ourselves to that immediately. Alright, so this user specifies they want a PC build that they can upgrade within 2 to 3 years, like a new CPU, then a new graphics card, but the container, guess the case, and motherboard should last longer in future as compatible. Cases, The biggest thing with future compatibility are just going to be the ATX size. Those are pretty much standard along the lines up of form factor preferences. So we'll just pick a basic ATX case. Same thing with the motherboard, we'll probably just pick an ATX motherboard since we can get away with doing some bundled deals on Newegg and or Micro Center. So we'll just start out with some of those. Now the thing with this small budget is we're probably going to have to do an AM4 build. $600 with the availability to upgrade in the future is kind of difficult on AM5. But we're not going to short ourselves with that. We're just going to build them out and go from there. Now the user also wants a mouse, keyboard, monitor, headset. I need them, but I'm ready to compromise on this all except monitor. That would be facing a lot as a beginner. Alright, so mouse, keyboard, and headset, we can probably just find some basic placeholders, some decent spec of peripherals. Monitor, it's $600 for our entire budget. So we're probably going to have to pick some full HD monitor. We're not going to be able to do a 1440p. Even if we did a 1440p monitor out of the gate, our $600 PC is not going to be able to do 1440p gaming. And then finally, with other requests, no RGB, don't want it rainbowish color fans, but I like colors. Blue and white built container, so a case like the ones you see on YouTube Shorts. Black ones with monochrome colors, AMD build, though I don't know which one is better. So it's going to be an ATX case. I'm from India and everything in your place like parts and prices would be quite similar with max difference of $10 to $20. The Dell Volstro 3590i5 10th gen with 1TB HDD. So the Dell Volstro would be a laptop and not a desktop. Now that we know what the user wants, why don't we create a small template with all the requests? And then we'll see what kind of systems we can build out from there. Alright, starting things out, here's our template build that we're going to build everything off of. We have our PNY CS900 500GB SSD. This is a 2.5 SATA SSD. For a case, we have the Zalman S2 ATX mid-tower case. Perfect for future-proof, has mesh on the front, an acrylic or tempered glass side panel. Pretty much fits that criteria of black with monochrome features. For our power supply, we have the MSI Mag A650BE. This is a 650 watt 80 plus bronze. Now I would want to switch this out for at least a 750 watt gold power supply, just so you don't have to worry about buying another power supply later on, and perfectly fine for future proofing. If we have room in the budget, I will change this out. It's just we need another like $30 to $50 to actually change that out, but we'll see. For our monitor, we're with the KTC H24 T09P. It's a 24-inch 1080p 165Hz monitor. We could go for a little less expensive monitor, but this one is a 1 millisecond response rate. Everything else is 3 to 4 milliseconds. For our keyboard, we just picked the Logitech K120. It's a wired standard keyboard. For our mouse, we went with the MSI Clutch wired optical mouse. This does have 5 buttons. And then for our headset, we went with the Creative Labs ChatMax HS620. Now there are other alternatives for the same or similar price. It's just all up to the user. Here's what we got. Now we're almost at half of our budget and we don't even have 90% of our build. We still need the CPU, the motherboard, the RAM, and the graphics card. And if we need a cooler, if they're not there, but we'll see if it's possible to do an AM5 system, but it seems like it's highly unlikely. But let's not sell ourselves short. Let's start out with our AM4 and see what we got. And here's our AM4 system. Went with the Ryzen 3 4100. It's a quad-core 8-thread, 3.8 GHz boosted to 4.0. Does have an included cooler. For motherboard, we went with the full ATX ASRock B550 Phantom Gaming. This does have Wi-Fi, but I just want to point out that for $30 to $40 less, we can get a mini ITX motherboard and then get a Wi-Fi adapter after that. But unfortunately, the user didn't specify if they were fine with a mini ITX motherboard. They just said they want us to make it so it's future-proofed. So unfortunately, you will have to spend more on the motherboard for the current moment. For our memory, we could have budgeted this a little bit, but a 16 gig kit of DDR4 3200 CL16, I mean, that's perfectly fine. Personally, I would have tried to get at least like one 8 gig stick and then later down the line upgrade it to another one, but dual channel memory is very important, so it's all up to the user what they want. For our video card, this was a bit difficult. With the Sparkle ELF Arc A380, good thing about those Intel Arc cards is that it's possible to build a system out on a budget. Now, the issue with this build is that the user specified they wanted an AMD GPU. We'll get into that in a minute. There's not a very big market brand new, so we're probably going to take the look at the used market for a video card, but we'll take a look at that in a minute. And then our case, power supply, monitor, keyboard, mouse, and headphones pretty much stay the same from our template build, sitting $2 over our budget. So if we take a look at our graphics card for 120 bucks and see if we can get an AMD GPU, it doesn't seem like we're going to get able to get a Radeon card for very cheap. So with 120 bucks, we could probably turn to like eBay or some other used marketplace and find an AMD GPU. But everything else is pretty much old when it comes to actual graphics cards. Nothing's pretty much worth it at that $120 price point. But if the user wanted to, they could take that $120 and put it towards their CPU that will come with an inbuilt graphics card. It may even perform a lot better than any graphics card we can get at this price point. Well, brand new that is. But seeing how difficult this is to make an AM4 system, we'll check out AM5 to see if it's possible. Then we'll take a look at some Micro Center deals. I know I keep repeating myself, but that's what we're going to do. And then we will probably end up modifying one of these builds with a used components list, mostly for a graphics card, and then see again what we end up with. So let's move on to AM5 and see what we can get. And here's what we got for our AM5 system. Went with the Ryzen 5 8500G. It's a 6-core, 12-thread, 4.1 GHz boosted to 5.0. For a motherboard, went with the Asus Prime B650 Plus ATX AM5 motherboard, which we can see is a bit expensive. We did save some money because our CPU does come with a cooler. Now, again, real quick with the motherboard, I'm going to show it for this one. For 70 bucks, we can get a non-Wi-Fi micro ATX motherboard. And then for 109, we can get a micro ATX motherboard that does have Wi-Fi compared to our 129. Now, this wouldn't, again, be enough to actually bring us with enough money to get a graphics card, but it's just something that you may be able to do if you tried. For our memory, we have the Kingston Fury Beast. This is an 8 gig stick of DDR5 6000 CL30. Again, dual channel memory would be better, but when we talk about the budget in a second, we'll see why. And then everything pretty much stays the same from storage, case, power supply, monitor, keyboard, mouse, and headphones. This build does not come with a dedicated graphics card. If we were to add a graphics card, we would actually be going way over our budget of $600 USD. And it's because this is the only CPU that we can get on AM5 that does have an included cooler. If we decided to go to AM5 and not get an included cooler, well, turns out it's still this same Ryzen 5 8500G. And that's pretty much about it. AM5 is a difficult build to do with 600 bucks, especially since we needed to get a monitor, keyboard, mouse, and headphones. It is doable if we didn't have to do those, but it's what the user specified. It all stems with that. Now, we have our AM4 and AM5 to take a look at on Micro Center. We'll see if we can get anything. All right, here we are on Micro Center. Let's check out some AMD bundles. Now we have $205 for AM4. So let's see if we can get anything on AM4 at the moment. All right, it doesn't seem like we have anything for AM4. Now we have $318 to do an AM5 build, But even with that, it doesn't seem like we have enough of that budget. Now we could go for this Ryzen 5 7600X, 16 gig stick of DDR5 6000 and B650M8 Prime. This is a micro ATX motherboard. So user, if you have a micro center that you have access to, you could go for this in place of the AM5 build, but there's still no dedicated graphics card. And I'm not even sure that the Ryzen 5 7600X actually comes with a cooler. So you'd actually end up having to spend practically the same money. So it is possible. I would not recommend this just because of the motherboard, even though in my opinion, for what the user is going to be using this for, the micro ATX motherboards are perfectly fine and actually have a lot of upgradability. So this is a possible contender. You can probably slap like a stock cooler or something we can get for like $10 online. But again, there is no dedicated graphics card, which means we're going to have to take a look at the used market. Now I know this video is getting kind of confusing, so I'll just break it down to this. Here's our AM4 builds. We will be switching out this Intel Arc graphics card for an AMD graphics card that we can possibly find on eBay. Here's our AM5 build that we don't have a dedicated graphics card, but we can upgrade the entire build to be this for Micro Center. So the last thing for us to do is just check out eBay, see what kind of AMD card we can get for $120 USD, and then that will be our final build. For graphics card, I was able to find an RX 5700 XT used for pretty much the same amount, and most of these are best offer, so you can possibly get this for $120 straight up. But if you're not able to find a 5700 XT, there is also the possibility of again going pre-built. Now I'm unsure how legit this is, but for $600 USD, you can get this Alienware Aurora Ryzen 7 5800, 16 gigabytes of RAM, and an RX 6600 XT. Again, $600. So I'm just gonna throw that out there. You can probably even get one used, but this pretty much meets the user's criteria. Now this is local pickup only, so it doesn't meet that specific criteria, but it's just an example of sometimes you can find some pre-builds for your budget. Unfortunately, it doesn't include the peripherals that the user requested. So that given the case, why don't we throw in RX 5700 XT onto our PC build, and that's it. Now, I know I normally go into game testing with CPU comparisons and everything, but because we are on such a tight budget, there's no real reason to actually compare anything, which leaves us with this. For AM4, we have the Ryzen 3 4100 build that does have the Intel Arc card. And then we have that same Ryzen 3 4100, but this time we have the RX 5700 XT that we found on eBay. And then we finalize this all out with our Ryzen 5 8500G AM5 build. But this one again doesn't have a dedicated graphics card. So down in the description below, I will include all 4 builds, just these hyperlinks with descriptions of what they are. User, again, I want to clarify, this is a very difficult thing to actually build out all brand new. Your best thing to do is just find some used components as best you can and put your budget towards specific components that you don't want to have to upgrade kind of throughout every so often. Thank you everyone for watching. User, I hope we actually built out some systems within your scope. Everyone else, consider subscribing, fill out that Google form. Like if you like, dislike if you dislike it, and I'll see you all in the next video.